Thank you, Emily. And good morning. This is Jennifer Morrison, the Commissioner of Public Safety. I am the co-chair of this Public Safety Communications Task Force. And I'm going to call this meeting number, I believe it was 41, regular meeting 41 to order at 11:17 hours on December 18th, 2024. So the meeting has been properly called to order, and we will do a roll call of members. If you could verbally acknowledge that you are here. Vice Chair Paul White.
I am here.
Co-Chair Barb Neal is absent today. If you could make that note, Emily, please. Jim Mack.
Here.
Ron Kumitz.
I am here.
Thank you, sir. Mike Donges. And Michael Wright. Hearing neither of them. They occasionally join late, so Emily, if you could keep an eye on the comings and goings, perhaps we will pick up one of them during the course of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is to approve the agenda for today's meeting, which was distributed on Friday by Emily. Do we have any proposed changes to today's agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to approval of the minutes from December 4th, regular meeting number 40. Does anyone have any proposed changes or additions to the minutes as circulated by Emily?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Thank
I
you
will
very
second
much,
that
Jim.
motion.
Thank you, Ron. Is there any discussion about approval of the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes from December 4th, regular meeting number 40, raise your hand or say aye. I've got Ron's hand electronically and the other three members' hands up, so we will consider the minutes approved. And that brings us to an introduction of Chief Recovery Officer Doug Farnham. And we thought it would be instructive to this task force, and particularly to our consultant partners, to hear about some of the work that the Recovery Office is doing in connection with response to disasters, but working closely with local communities, and particularly around the concept of regionalization of recovery services. So I don't want to get too far into what Doug has been up to and what his team is working with, but as we contemplate a future system or system of systems, it's important to note that there are other regionalization schemes that are either being built or are already in flight. I think about EMS, the way they're built up into districts around the state, and other service delivery schemes that rely on a regional model. So I thought it would be great to have Doug share what they're working on with us so that we can put that into the mix for consideration. With that, Doug, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Morrison. So yes, there's a couple of things at play here. One is in the short term, things that are actively in flight. The recovery team, primarily through Eric Philcorn, who's on loan from BGS, is working with FEMA and engaging with different regions of the state to create regional recovery networks. The intent there is that a regional recovery network is an advocacy channel, a way to regionally collect issues and track them and route them upwards, right? In order to make sure that different sections of the state, different regions are going to have different problems. They were definitely, especially with this year's floods, hit in extremely different degrees, right? The northeast section of the state was hammered, and southern section of the state really didn't have any damage. Edges of Chittenden County actually experienced much more damage than they did last year in last year's event. So the damage overlay for every disaster is different. So no regional network is perfect for every event in the long term. But what we've endeavored to do working with FEMA is to consider all of the various layers that are currently exist in Vermont at the regional level. And I'm just going to, one thing before I run through that list, is that Eric Philcorn will be available to act as a kind of an operational link. FEMA has been producing this map for us that we use to make decisions about how our regional recovery networks would be stood up. And it's organic, it's a work in progress. And that map it's on federal technology, so it can be difficult to access, but it is not confidential information, right? It's a federal resource, but Eric can help get people access to that. He can help get data out of it. And with the intent that, they've mapped a lot of layers for us. A lot of them came from our existing data sets, but we didn't have a place where this many layers were put in one place. So we mapped bridges, culverts, roads, fire stations, electric transmission lines, utility service territories, building footprints, historic districts, the counties and towns, of course, regional planning commissions, regional economic development regions, the VTrans maintenance districts, community actions agencies or the designated agencies, hospital catchment areas, health department districts, wastewater and solid waste facilities, wastewater service areas, conservation districts, and watersheds. And of all of those layers, so we overlaid all those layers so we could see where we were starting to see rational overlap, and especially with the damage that occurred from the 2023 floods and from the 2024 floods, because they had different damage patterns, being inundation versus a fluvial erosion event. And the layers that we found to be most persuasive in setting up our regional recovery networks were the VTrans maintenance districts and the watersheds, because the way you build your roads and the way water flows tend to inform, damage clusters in water-based events. And they also tend to inform how we're organized and where our resources are and how we can respond. So we didn't limit ourselves to just, lining those two areas up, but those definitely had the most sway, I would say, in how we approached this. So I am going to pull up, if I can find the right document. Hopefully let me see what this is called. I'm going to try to pull up some of the screenshots, document 4. Okay. You'd think that the dropdown would be alphabetized, but it is not.
No.
All right, so is everyone seeing
Yes.
the map? Okay. So we divided the state primarily for resource purposes, and Commissioner Morrison's well familiar with this, having had 3 regional coordinators to cover the entire state for a number of years. We theoretically had 3 resources that we were going to be able to apply to connect to these regional recovery networks. So we had North, Central, and Southern Vermont. You can see the different colored shades within North. We broke North Vermont up into 4 sections. The Lamoille River corridor was something that doesn't line up with Lamoille County, so we regionalized the Lamoille River impact. We separated northern and southern Northeast Kingdom and Essex and Orleans County, primarily there because when looking at the damage clusters, when looking at the infrastructure, the northern Northeast Kingdom and the southern experience those events differently, right? The southern half of Essex County had very little in common with the northern half. And then, of course, the Franklin Grand Isle, the northern Franklin Grand Isle. Now, in central Vermont, there's some room for growth and differentiation here. We primarily did because of the Winooski corridor, right? That included with the headwaters, central Vermont is largely driven by the Winooski corridor. But I do think that Orange County and the southern half of the NEK in the north right now, there are some damage clusters and more in common there. So we're still looking at these boundaries and thinking about how to reorganize them. The major roadblock has been the existing artifacts, right? The regional planning commission areas. The first piece of feedback was, well, just draw your map like along our lines. The regional planning commissions are set up properly. And one thing I would say is that they are not. They're not set up based on a geographic risk distribution. The RPC boundaries were formed based on a political process where towns got to choose which one they went along with. So those towns chose to go with those different groups, mostly for cultural reasons and not necessarily for practical reasons like shared risk or shared infrastructure. So I would say the historical county boundaries, in some rare cases, moving on to the southern section, the southern Vermont, Rutland County and Windham County, we are allowing those to go forward as regional recovery networks, even though this shows Windsor and Windham together and Rutland and Addison together. We learned that Rutland and Addison County, they don't want to work together. Rutland tried to get Addison County to work with them, and they had zero participation, zero interest in a shared regional footprint with Rutland. So for cultural reasons, we are allowing Rutland and Windham to go forward because their damage patterns, they are largely self-sufficient. They do reflect a rational watershed and rational infrastructure layout. They're two of our only counties that actually do that properly. It just, I think, is complete coincidence. But Rutland and Windham were kind of piloting regional recovery networks in those two counties because the counties just happen to have a rational boundary. This map is just our an example of one of the layers, the combination of layers that can be displayed by the tool that Eric Philcorn can get people access to, can get people information from. And that is, just a county-based layer with our fire stations and our transmission lines and our main river corridors overlaid on it. So in looking at where are our river corridors, right? Risk generally radiates from those in an inundation event. And of course, Orange County, not having main river corridors, but having a high risk of effluvial erosion that's related more to those headwaters. That's where it gets trickier and probably needs more nuance. But I think that the tool that Eric's been working with FEMA to develop is helpful for informing decisions. But one thing I definitely learned through this process was that regardless of your data or rationality, we are going to run into cultural issues where some sections of the state just are not going to have any interest in working with another area. So that's a practical reality, I would say,
Hey,
that
Doug,
should be considered. Commissioner.
did any of your layers, when you were thinking about, your geography, did any of them show mountaintops or topography in any way? Because the river corridors are important, but when we think about telecommunication, land mobile radios, we need to think about topography and how to communicate around the mountains.
Right. I think there was a topo layer built in there. Eric had a conflict today where he's actually at a meeting to launch the recovery website. But I think if the layer's not in there now, I do think that's something we could build in pretty easily because I know VCGI has that and FEMA could help us build that into the tool. So that could be certainly an option.
Thank you.
Right. And I think that topo layer informally played a role in some of our decisions about where county boundaries make sense and where they don't make sense. Because there are some counties in Vermont where you literally cannot get to the eastern side of that county from the western side of that county. You have to go out, travel around through other counties in order to access that. And so as a group discussing your shared risks, your shared issues, that makes zero sense, right? To have essentially landlocked elements within the same discussion group. They're just not going to have anything in common. And they're going to have much more in common with that happened mostly in Windsor County. Windsor and Rutland, the overlap between those two was a big one. And of course, and again in Bennington and Windham. But it was worse, I think, in Windsor and Rutland and Addison's overlap.
When you started your work around the recovery groups, was there ever a conversation around just sticking with county lines?
Yes. Yes, there was definitely a discussion of that. I think the 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 main reason we moved away from that was the egregious, like I think Lamoille County is the most egregious example of somewhere where like Hardwick has a huge amount of risk from the Lamoille River, right? But it's not part of Lamoille County. And then the towns to the west of Lamoille County that along that until you get to that lake, again, that's that same problem. Um, where they don't have well, they have some topographic issues, some, elevation issues, but their major risk comes from that river basin, right? Um, for ease of administration, yes, going to the county levels would get you most of the way there as long as you had a way to encourage those counties to be communicating more actively. But we've just seen that break down so much in the past that even when we have a region, they don't necessarily talk. Like this last fall was one of the first times Hardwick had been invited to a Lamoille River Basin planning conversation. Right? They were never aware of them. They were never invited, and they have a huge element of shared risk. Everything people do upriver of them, or downriver, sorry. And then yeah, and that's one reason with the county boundaries, and then the main detractor from the AOT maintenance districts is that AOT, because of their mission, tends to try to ignore those topographical boundaries. Like they're the ones that have to maintain the passes and the stretches between, so they can't have one group leaving off at the edge of a high risk spot for them and another group picking it up. They have to have the same district span that high risk area. Whereas for most people, they don't care about that, right? But because it's transportation, they have to span that high risk connector.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Are you able to take questions from the task force or our consultants?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you got, guys and gals? Miss Bonnie's on.
Uh, I don't have anything right at the moment, other than is is there public access to this information, the maps or the data layer, for example? Certainly would be something to be interested in looking further into. We have developed some similar maps looking at various regions because as Jen alluded to, we're looking at um, potential communication zones for public safety communications throughout the state. And we're looking at what makes the most sense to have to develop boundary layers or boundaries for wireless systems. We a more efficient way of communicating with public safety agencies than what's being done today would be to have regional systems that would pool a number of resources and cover a larger area. We have to look at what makes sense in terms of areas to cover based on topography and then also based on those towns slash counties that logically work together. So we have looked at those. We have mapped the regional planning commissions, the counties, obviously, other boundaries. These would be of interest to look at as well.
So we can get controlled access. There's no because it's a federal tool that has licensing and things that go along with it.
Right.
We can get the team access to it. There's no public website location right now to access it from, but we can get access to it through.
Well, actually, maybe the best thing would be just the one image that you showed with the three regions, the north, south, and central, and then how they were further broken up into subregions. If we could have a list of the towns that are in each of those regions, then we can recreate that fairly easily. Is that something that could be shared?
I think it might be useful for someone, and I don't know who someone is, to spend time with Eric when he's available, because there's
Mhm.
more layers that we're not seeing.
Yes.
Sure.
And like when I think about what I don't know, which is how to communicate around mountains and stuff like that, there might be someone like Ron or other engineer type people, Scott Neal, who might be going through the different layers of mapping with that they've already loaded into this and say that most closely resembles what we know to be true in Vermont, particularly if we can add the topography as a layer into the map. So I'm not sure that exporting one particular thing is going to, it might be one of those processes of discovery, Dom. And obviously
Sure.
we could set up a meeting with you and Scott Neal and whoever all else is, the brains of this operation around what makes sense for regions.
Right.
And then once we know what we want, figure out how to get hard copies of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I think Eric will be able to facilitate that. I think
Great.
he would be able to facilitate a deeper dive into the tool, like showing you every layer that's built in there, what that looks like. He can work on getting the topography built in if it's not in there, which it wasn't a named layer, but I think it was like one of the base layers that we started with. And
Excellent.
then, yes, I think at the end of the day, none of it is protected information. It's it only takes a couple steps to access because FEMA's the one maintaining it for us and doing a lot of the legwork and building stuff for us, which is
Sure.
helpful. But they haven't given us any issues as far as exporting data from that. If people want to see, the different layers, the data that created those, most of it is just Vermont data, right? The only layers they wouldn't export for us would be the individual assistance damage data.
Yeah, we
That's
don't care about
something
that.
that they don't want to share, right?
Yeah.
That because
Yeah,
of
that wouldn't be an
the
issue.
individual nature. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, we would appreciate that.
So I can facilitate a meeting with Eric, Dom and Rick, if you can help me figure out who should be
Mhm.
in attendance. I personally will take any opportunity to spend time with Eric because he's a heck of a guy and very helpful. So you will enjoy your time with him. But we could set it up with whoever you think from the task force should be present, up to 3 of us, and who from MCP and etc.
Okay,
So,
great.
And that would be
Bonnie and
ideal.
Jason. I'm sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
No, I'd say that would be ideal. Absolutely.
Jason and Bonnie, does this sound like this would be helpful? I know Scott's not here, but does this sound like a promising next step for mapping?
Yeah, I think it even just at a bare minimum having, a look at how they have their regions broken down, at least preliminarily, that could be of use to us, as well as some of the other information. So appreciate that invite.
Yeah, I think it's just important that we try to familiarize ourselves with as many schemes that already exist, particularly the ones that work well or make sense for the mission that we're trying to accomplish. Um, I would love to see what the hospital catchment areas look like. You know what I mean? I'd look at that and maybe somebody light bulbs go off and people go, well, that's exactly what we should be doing, right? So thank you very much, Doug. Is there any last minute wisdom you want to give us about trying to sort this out?
Yeah, I would just say there's also the regional governance study committee that's going. They haven't gotten down into the weeds about, the geographic breakout. They've talked about it at the edges. I think that work is going to be largely paused from now through the session because one of the co-chairs did not win re-election. So that's a thing that's out there, but I doubt that it will be producing complementary or contradictory information in the next 6 months. It will probably pick up again in the summer. And they've also been given access to a presentation on that tool. So we're just trying to share the information. And I think the last thing I would say is obviously just acknowledging we're creating the regional recovery networks for a different purpose, right? So how we went about that might be valuable
Right.
information for you, but it wouldn't make any sense for it to be more than just contributory information for you. Because it's
So
based
Tim, may
on
I
where
ask you a
people were
question
hurt.
before?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Doug, I really appreciate this insight and having, what you're doing and our teams having availability to the information and to your insight and Eric's is great. I was curious, when you put the data together, is that information based on responses, emergency response information that's coming from any of the dispatch centers or, I mean, you're getting calls for service and so as you're creating your map, is that one of the underlying layers that help you develop it based on, emergency response to given, given geographic areas?
So we looked at an overlay of we didn't have the emergency response data, but we had 211 data, which is kind of a proxy for that, right? The damage report information. We looked at the FEMA claims, which is like the adjudicated version of 211. That's assuming that people successfully engage with FEMA, which is not always the best assumption, right? So we took both of those things with a grain of salt because some of the 211 reports, 211 data is useful and it's good preliminary data, but it's preliminary, right? And then
And it's about property damage, Rick. It's not about life safety.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's a FEMA report from your applying for aid.
It's a report that we gather to know how to help Vermonters and connect them to services like, is your heating system out and is it going to be winter? But the 211 data was sort of the first stop for people to flag for the state, hey, I have damage. And because they can't report it to FEMA until a certain level of disaster is approved by the White House. So in the absence of telling people to sit on their hands for 8-10 weeks and not do anything, we had them report data to 211. We were able to address immediate needs, for them. And then when FEMA declared that we were eligible for individual assistance, then they could suck up all that data and fill in around the edges for their FEMA report.
Thank you.
And last year, we started using that 211 data to do callbacks and confirmations with people to make sure that if they had damages, that they were engaging with FEMA if they were willing to. Some people, at the end of the day, are unwilling or uninterested in engaging with FEMA.
I'm unwilling. I'm not interested in any more contact with FEMA. Do you think that will come true?
So I think and actually one last thought, Commissioner, response and recovery are like two sides of the same coin, and response, of course, overlaps a lot with communications. But it is, I don't know, I guess I'm struggling to say it. It is interesting that they are two sides of the same coin. They do have an inflection point, but we have been trying to be very careful in the recovery effort about not letting the tail wag the dog, right? There's a lot of more operational, time-sensitive, response-related issues that, in my opinion, should take priority. And recovery is kind of something that actually, every time it happens, need to be shaped by the facts unique to that particular event. And I do, every time I dip my oar in this water, I worry about things that I'm doing improperly influencing the response and the operational side of the structure. So there's always that risk, right? But we still have to talk about it, and we just do our best to keep in mind that while they're connected, the response more often impacts life safety and Recovery is important, but it is generally not a life safety concern. So it is a lower order of risk when you're dealing with recovery issues.
Well, I'm super appreciative that you made time for us on such short notice, and this has, for me, been very helpful, and I look forward to spending time with Eric and the map. Any other questions, team?
Nope.
All right, thanks,
All right.
Doug. We'll let you go and get
Thank
back
you,
to the
sir.
rest
Thank you
of
for having
our
me. Thank
you.
riveting
Thank
agenda.
you.
Thank you. What does the team think? I mean, when opportunities like this come along to hear from how other people have decided to carve up the state, would it be useful to bring them forward to the group?
Yes, yes, certainly.
Yeah. I was surprised when he rattled off the list of all the different regional groupings that they considered. I was surprised that the state police division of the state was not one of them.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, it's true.
and maybe it is because he only rattled off like 10. He said that they have dozens of layers, but
Right.
yeah, interesting. We have the 10 barracks across the state.
Which are pretty much centered around population centers.
Right, right. Population centers that don't have municipal services.
Right, correct.
Right. So anyway, okay. So I'm appreciative of Doug's time, and we can move on now to public comment. Emily, I don't see anyone other than internal team here. Does anyone see any members of the public?
No.
Okay, seeing no members of the public, we will skip on to project updates. Televate, you can go first.
Okay, thank you. Probably the task force members are very familiar with where we are currently. We're in the heat of development, certainly, of the kind of the meat of the project. The inventory and assessment report draft was delivered. I say delivered, but via remote access a couple of weeks ago, and we've all had a chance to review that and provide comments. We compiled the comments, which were sent back to MCP, and they have developed updated documents based on those comments. And we're currently in the process of reviewing those updates and the comments provided to hopefully soon finalize that document. In parallel, we have held a number of workshops to further provide input into the system planning process. We have successfully held workshops for lessons learned from previous activities, operations, dispatch operations, technologies, the dispatch technologies, including CAD, RMS, others, governance workshop, and finally, earlier this week, we held a wireless coverage workshop, which addressed both issues related to LMR coverage as well as cellular broadband coverage. Also, recently, we did have the third and final community listening session, which was held on the 6th of December. Finally, what I'd like to report is that we have a draft outline for the system planning document, which has been provided by MCP, and we are currently in the process of reviewing that, and we will have some comments back to MCP on that as well. We look forward to getting draft sections that report as soon as they are available to hopefully kind of piecemeal the document to us to give us capability to review it whenever it is available, since we will have a tight schedule for turnaround once the initial draft is provided, which is scheduled for January 10th, which of course is coming up quite quickly. I believe that,
Dom, do we have
yes.
a date? I'm putting time on my calendar for Monday to review the draft outline. I just don't think I can do it this week, given my schedule. Do we have a date that we said we'd return feedback?
We don't have a date when we provide feedback, no, but we want to do that obviously as soon as possible. If you can review it Monday, That
I
would be
will.
great. We have a call with MCP on Mondays at 11. So we can certainly discuss comments then. Rick and I have reviewed it. We're compiling our comments and we'll send those out prior to that so you can have those as well. It's a just an outline right now. It's not terribly lengthy, so it shouldn't be a lot to review.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Happy to answer any other questions. Okay, thank you.
All right, Jason Malloy, you're up from MCP.
So not a whole lot to add to what Dom said. As far as the excuse me, as far as the system plan document, we definitely heard everyone's feedback on the length of that document loud and clear. Definitely anything over 100 pages probably won't get read. Our target, at least internally, we're trying to be as concise and informative with our language as we can. So we are pretty much shooting for roughly 30 to 50 pages, give or take. Hopefully that'll be a little bit easier of a read for everybody and a little bit easier review process. And that's really the only update I have other than what we already provided for Dom.
And I haven't looked at it yet, Jason, but appreciative of your, reflecting back to us about the length of the document. I think that understanding that the inventory document was super huge, I still think the concept of companion documents for people who want to go on a deep dive on certain areas is a good one. So if you do run into technical areas or you want to give a much longer explanation on governance or training standards or appendices, things like that, I think that's a great way to break out of the main body of the report, a place where people who want to take a deep dive can without having to weed through it in the body of the main report.
Understood. Appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
So a quick question. This document that we're talking about reviewing and giving feedback on, it's just the one-page table of contents, right? Is there another document that I missed?
That's it for now.
Okay.
It's just the outline. It's an
Right.
outline, right?
That's true, Paul. Yeah.
So Paul, we are reviewing and have provided an initial list of inquiries on the inventory report, the second draft of that report. So Dom and I are reviewing that, and if any of the task force members have the time, interest to review it, they can. But I think during our last meeting, Dom and I were tasked with going through that document and providing feedback to MCP regarding the status of it, and we are doing that, and intend to finish that today, not later than tomorrow. If any of the task force members would like to review it again, that document was sent over by Jason over the weekend, or I think it was Friday it arrived.
I'm not sure that I got that.
It was actually late Monday night, but close enough for government work, Rick.
All right.
Paul's address sometimes is finicky. Sometimes people are using his old address.
Yeah, be sure that you use his task force address.
Yeah, I got two emails yesterday. The second one was just correcting the link that was included in the first one for the table of contents. But I don't think I got a second draft of the previous document.
I see that was just sent to Barb and Jen in the Monday evening email.
All right.
That's why he didn't get it.
Yeah,
Monday.
I see it. It came in it was a late night. It was 11, came in 11:30, 1 p.m.
Right.
Huh, isn't that funny?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
since
to myself, Bonnie, Phil, Barb, and Jen. Yep. So yeah, the other members weren't provided it.
And this was on Monday night?
Yeah,
Correct.
Monday night.
Yes, it was Monday evening.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that was
11:30.
Yes, I
only
think the discussion was for Televate to review the
Yeah.
comments, and we have boiled that down to, or are in the process of boiling that down to just a handful of comments that we feel are necessary for the majority of the task force to review. Certainly, they're,
So I show at 11:25 a.m. Jason sent it to all the task force. And Paul, it's to your
Hmm.
partner email
I think
address.
No,
Jen,
that
I
was a
think we're
table of
talking about two
contents.
different we're talking about two different emails.
yeah, that was the
Yeah.
draft.
You're referring to the
table of
table of
contents.
contents
Yes.
email.
Right.
The
Right.
one that was sent out late in the evening Monday, that was the redlined inventory report and the stakeholder review worksheet with our responses.
Exactly.
Yes.
I don't have it sitting in my inbox. Can you?
Okay, I will
resend it
forward.
to me?
Yes, ma'am, I will. I will forward it right now.
Thank you.
And again, our plan, Televate's plan is to, we have reviewed all of those comments. There's dozens of them, of course, that were compiled. And we're trying to boil that down to just a handful that we feel the task force needs to take a closer look at.
Okay. Very good. Do we have
Which
other
we could
updates?
do during the Monday meeting if if a benefit. Oh, but Monday the 23rd meeting. But I'm assuming people are going to be taking off. So
Well,
I'm working on Monday.
yeah.
So okay. We are done with project updates. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have new business to come before the task force?
I have a question though before we move on, Jen, if I could.
Yes.
So Jason, you need our feedback on the document before you reach out to the PSAPs and dispatch centers to confirm their data? Is that a correct position?
Correct. We would want to make sure that all of the language and such, any updates required of the task force, that those are made. That way we can send a clean copy to each individual agency of their data.
Yeah. So with that said, the sooner the better. Dom and I can finish our comments, today, not later than tomorrow. If any of the other task force members want to weigh in, first of all, they'd have to have a copy of this document, but I don't know. I don't know if it's required.
I think the next step is for the agencies to confirm their information. So if you guys know what all our first round of feedback was.
Right.
Yes.
Conveyed it. They're now replying to us. Let's get you, once you guys provide a second round of feedback, let's have MCP get the updated draft out to the individual agencies, because I'll be very curious to see what feedback we get from them.
Fair enough.
If I can suggest, Televate has a meeting scheduled with yourself, Jen, and Paul, and Barb tomorrow afternoon. And I know Rick has a conflict, and we were trying to reschedule that, which may not work. But
it's all right.
Maybe we can use that time to go over those few comments that we wanted to address with the task force. I think that would be a good time to do that tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
Perfect.
some of those comments are we comfortable in releasing this information? Or is this something that we want to put in the report at this time? So one or two of those comments regard that.
Right.
Okay. All right. Barb and I discussed offline the next meeting date, which technically should be on the 1st, which we're obviously not going to meet on the 1st. Because of upcoming timelines and the importance of staying on task as we go into the session, I would propose that we don't meet on the 1st, obviously, but that we do hold a special meeting on the 8th to make up for missing the 1st, and then meet again on the 15th, 1 week later, and get back into our every 2-week cadence. Does that sound rational to do January 8 and 15 and then get back into the regular cadence?
Yes.
Yes.
Ron K, Mike W.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. Perfect. I love that.
Perfect.
Very affirming for me, Michael. Thank you. I needed that. Okay, so Emily, if you can make sure that the task force members are adequately forewarned that we'll have a special meeting on the 8th of January, regular meeting number 42 on the 15th, and we'll get right back into our every 2-week cadence. Is there anything else before I ask for a motion to adjourn?
How about Merry Christmas to everyone?
And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays,
Yeah,
however you celebrate. We're
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I think the New Year's going to
Okay.
bring big things. Big things.
Yeah.
So
Some
thanks
of-
for all your
some
hard
of
work in
we'll be-
2024.
Thank you.
We'll still be talking to some of you prior to, but for those we
I
don't.
know. I know. But I just do want to say that the task force has put in yeoman's work in 2024, and all 7 of us have
Absolutely.
spent a lot of time, and we're getting there. We knew this was not one of those things where you get immediate gratification, but the moment of gratification is coming. So anyway, thank you to the task force members. Thank you to our trustee consultants. Emily, thank you for your willingness to be part of this, and we'll see you all on the 8th.
Thank you, everyone.
Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a
So
motion
moved.
to adjourn.
Take your pick.
I got 5 people making a motion to adjourn, and we'll give Paul the second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
I got 5 of 5, so we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
I know.
Thank you,
See you next year.
everyone.